So the Saratoga meet has come to a close. It was 39 days, if you remember, because they did cancel one day of racing. Handle was up, and it really just is such a cash cow for NYRA, and they put on a tremendous show. And there might be a little bit of an extended show going forward. It might expand the meet a little bit. John and I are going to put on our presidential hats and have a little debate about that later in the show. A couple major factors to discuss about the Saratoga meet. I think the safety numbers is a huge deal. Mm-hmm. Like, we'll talk about the individual performances. We had a great closing weekend. I want to talk about some of the jockey comings and goings, but the safety record was absolutely tremendous, especially compared to last year. Now, there was one major caveat. Unfortunately, we had a really, really ugly breakdown of the big torpedo where I believe it was Friday in the Saranac Stakes. And I just want to give our heartfelt condolences and thoughts to Tom Morley and Maggie Wolfendale, because we know you guys, we love you guys, and know how much you care about these horses. And he in particular was like one of the stars of the barn. So I know that had to be so difficult for you guys. So just know that we're thinking about you. And that was obviously horrible to watch. Thankfully, everybody else, the riders and the other horse, were okay, because it could have been even worse than that. But I know that's cold comfort to them. Overall, though, the Saratoga meet was phenomenally safe. There were 3 total fatalities. There was the big torpedo, and there were 2 training fatalities. That's compared to 14 racing fatalities last summer. We all remember where we were last summer and what a really kind of a nadir it was for the sport, and just really bring up these existential questions about whether this thing is really sustainable for the long run. 11,614 works were timed this summer at Saratoga, nearly 400 races with more than 3,000 starters. Incredible improvement year over year. And, some of these things, there's never like one root cause or one thing you point to say, this is why there were so many breakdowns. This is why there weren't any breakdowns. But I do think that the efforts from David O'Rourke and Dr. Scott Palmer and all of the people that do the track maintenance, Glenn Kozak, everybody at NYRA and in the New York equine sphere, that has really all put their heads together and tried to figure out, how do we keep the horses as safe as possible after last summer. And I think they all deserve a major tip of the cap. Like I said, John, we can talk about the action on the track, but this is the most important thing after last summer. And they did a great job keeping everybody safe.
Well, I think there's a lot of kudos and wet willies to take away from this meet. And I can't coin that phrase. It's actually from Paul Schwartz, for the Giants beat writer, who talks about good things and bad things every week. And certainly the safety record, again, except for that last weekend, where it all counts. But when you have a major horse like Torpedo, come in and break down, unfortunately, on a national stage, it does leave a bad taste in your mouth, and it does always make you wanting more as far as improving safety. And I think NYRA has done a good job. So much so, Joe, that we talk about it in the short run with Saratoga, but they're also in building a multi-million-dollar track surface. The all-weather track surface they're going to have at Belmont, starting next year, I believe. We're always trying to push forward and always trying to do better. I think that their safety record was very good. When you look at other, points of interest as to whether or not were they successful this meet versus last year. All sources handle was over $800 million. It was just under $800 million last year. Average handle was up 3%, even though the daily paid attendance was down 2.5%. So people who were there, were betting a little bit more. On-track handle was about the same also. Races on the turf only had 45 races on the turf versus 65 last year. And I think that was by design. If they thought that the turf course was the least bit concerning, then they immediately shifted to the dirt. Despite that, the average field size was almost the same, 7.8 versus 7.6 last year. All the statistics, we're thankful or we appreciate from NYRA. And then you had, the trainers race, which you could say wasn't really a race. Chad Brown winning 40 of the 165 starts that he had for 24%, which was amazing. Todd Pletcher, obviously, with the big Travers win, and his crossing of the in the canoe, which I love as a tradition. Mike Maker, Linda Rice are always there, and then I got to talk a little bit my man Mark Casse, who only had 15 winners, but 15 winners from 52 starts, almost a 30% win percentage, and a great majority of those, Joe, were 2-year-olds. So anytime we looked at 2-year-old maiden race coming in, Mark Casse was certainly important in those races. And then from a jockey standpoint, we had Dylan on the show, and he finished in a flat foot tie for third place, and just kept winning at. I don't know what the numbers are. I'm sure you can look this up, but his average win payout had to have been higher than the other top 5 jockeys that were out there, whether it's Irad, Flavien, who, again, you mentioned had a phenomenal meet. Tyler had a very good meet. And Manny Franco also coming in, and getting his share of 27 victories, nudging out Jose Ortiz, who did ride a little bit more in Kentucky this summer. But I think by any metric, Joe, that you look at it, this Saratoga meet was a success. Were there issues with, constant rain? Yeah, but they don't have control over that. Were there some substandard fields overall in some of the races? Yes. But as you can see, they had, almost 8 horses per race, which is really solid. And they had a lot of people coming in and watching and betting on these races. And Saratoga is a meet unto itself. It's just a very unique scenario and very unique situation.
Just to correct something that John said real quick, he was talking about off the turf races. When he mentioned the number of turf races, there were 412 races this year at Saratoga, 257 on dirt and 155 on the turf. Last year, there were 270 on dirt and 140 on turf. So we actually got luckier this year. It didn't seem like it during the beginning of middle of August, but we actually got luckier with the weather this year. I want to talk about Flavien Prat because I remember this when we were on the old show and we had him on, and he was riding out in California, and he was just so obviously better than everybody else. Like, not just in the standings. You watch him on the track, he was so much better than everybody else. He was just in the perfect spot every single time. Great finisher, all you could ever ask for. He would always show up and show out when he came to New York or Kentucky. Right. And then he would fly back to California and continue to dominate there. And I remember nudging him. I was like, bro, if you want to win an Eclipse Award, you got to come to New York. This is where you really make your bones. This is where you're going to get those kind of A-level mounts throughout the entire season, not just the parachute in for 1 or 2 races. And that's borne out. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying that if and when he does get the Eclipse Award, he should have me on stage and thank me. But, it could be a classy gesture from my man Flavor Flav. No, but for real.
Or at least send you a gift. At least send you a wedding gift. Exactly. Because you are still registered.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for plugging the registry again. I didn't do it enough in the open.
I'm here for you, buddy.
Just in case anybody else is thinking of sending any gifts. No, but for real, like he's proven it. And I'm so gratified to see this. Like he stood tall against the best jockey colony in the world by far. And I know he didn't win the jockey's title. Irad won that. Irad's got more wins total this year. He's got 223. Flav's got 157. But Flavien Prat is ahead in the money race. And if you look at the average earnings per start, Flavien is far ahead of everybody else at over 31,000 plus per mount. He smashed the record of stakes wins at Saratoga, and he finished it out, like, just to not leave any doubt. He finished it out this past weekend with wins in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, the Hopeful, the Saranac, and the With Anticipation. So won 4 graded stakes over the weekend just to put the nail in the coffin for that record. Shout out to Flavien Prat because he had a comfy thing. He had a comfy gig out in California. He could have ridden out there and just stacked up riding titles forever. He challenged himself. He came to the best riding colony in the world, and he's shown he's a top 5 rider in this country.
Much like, again, because it's all about us, Joe, much like we did when we migrated away from the previous podcast to start our own thing. We could have stayed there and lived very, very well off our writers' room royalties and everything like that. But no, we took the shot. We were the Flavien Prats of podcasting. is what I have to say. Yes, and now we have mugs to prove it. But
yeah, merch.
But I loved Flavien's ride on Chancellor McPatrick. Now, some people can say, hey, he was obviously the best horse in the race, and he's going to be a superstar. You might be able to say that. But the way that he navigated that horse in and out of traffic and making sure that his horse always had a clear path, and that was just the most recent example of what a solid race rider he is. There's a lot of riders out here, especially, that can break a horse on top and kind of say, come and catch me if you can. But Flavien's got a lot of skill as far as being able to ride front runners, being able to ride come from behind horses, getting a horse to relax, getting a young horse to relax, which is really difficult to do. And you're right. He is, we're not saying anything that's outrageous here, saying that he's one of the top, riders in the country right now, but it's so great to see him make his bones against the top colony, arguably the top colony of the year.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's interesting. And so, I think to me, if the voting were done today, he would have to be Eclipse champion jockey. There's still time to go. We always got the Breeders' Cup. That's going to have a big say in things. But to me, in terms of riding on the big stage, it's been him and then everybody else. And that's no disrespect to Irad, who's obviously a phenomenal rider, had another great Saratoga meet, well-deserved riding title. But in the big spots, Flavien's been the guy this year. So that's to me going to be one of the fascinating things going into the Eclipse Award season to see if he does get that trophy. And it's interesting you bring up Chancellor McPatrick because he was, there are a lot of horses we could talk about from closing weekend, but he was the one that really jumped out to me because, John, you rarely ever see this, a 2-year-old dirt horse that's a deep closer like that. Yeah. And his race, like his debut race, like he was hopelessly beaten until like the last 16th of a mile and somehow flew past that Bill Mott horse and then had to outclose a 3-5 favorite yesterday in the Hopeful. So that's just so interesting to me because these races, 2-year-old races, dirt races are usually won on the lead or close to the lead. It's a good training job by Chad Brown too, I got to say, because, obviously he won the training title. It's a good training job by him to get that horse to be able to take dirt and still come with his run because he was the star of the weekend to me.
He was the star of the weekend and he arguably was also the star of the OBS under tax show, which is why he brought $725,000 as a 2-year-old. I mean, that's a lot of money for a first-year sire progeny in McKinsey, and he showed it. But to come off the pace, 6.5 furlongs, come off the pace 7/8 of a mile, that is really unusual. Some people are comparing him to Sierra Leone. I know you don't like that comparison, Joe, because you don't really like the horse, but some people would say that he's got a similar racing style to Big Brother SL. I say that tongue in cheek. He's not really related, but the same kind of racing of coming from off it, and it should behoove him as the races continue to go longer and longer.
Yeah. No doubt. And he's clearly like the most exciting 2-year-old from the meet, I think, so far. But I just to wrap this up, I got to give a major hat tip to David O'Rourke and everybody at NYRA. We banged on them a little bit earlier in the meet for some of the little snafus they've had this year. But when it comes to Saratoga, the TV show is great. The production is terrific. They do great renovations and additions to Saratoga every single year without kind of disrupting its original charm. And the safety record, I know everybody there is hard at work all the time and knowing that that's the number one priority. And it really bore out this meet. And I'm very happy and very proud of the effort that NYRA and the New York Racing Circuit put on.